Sarah Giesel, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Woo!
I'm excited to have you, and some people don't know who you are. They might have seen your past episode with me, but you played college soccer with me at Johns Hopkins University, and you're a year older than me, and we became best friends ever since I stayed with you on my recruiting trip and finally chose to play at Hopkins. And we became really close throughout our time there, and we're still best friends today, and I've seen you grow so much, and we're going to just kind of touch on some of the things you went through in college and some of the dark times. And Sarah had dealt with an eating disorder in college while she was playing soccer, and as a friend, I saw her just decline, and it was really heartbreaking for me. But thankfully, she did come out on the other end. So, Sarah, let's just start off with just how this began and some of the early red flags when your eating disorder started.
So I would say that as a sophomore, freshman year went great. I came in with probably no cognizant awareness of like body image outside of being strong and at a high fitness level coming in to play. As a freshman, you're trying to like prove your position. I was a center back, so by nature I was already I'm quite tall. I'm like 5'10" and a half. Always been just stronger in general. And so when I came in freshman year, the only thing I was thinking of is just to be physically fit, strong to play against girls that were 4 years older than me. And also that I was also just injury in this like injury prevention mind too, because I had 3 ACLs in high school. And so my goal was just to be ready to play my sport and to play at the collegiate level. And like it went well. I got in a bunch of games. I played well. And we were graduating one of the seniors at that time. So I knew that sophomore year I was like gunning for a starting spot. And the season went well. Actually, my sophomore year went well. I again didn't really have any pain of mind. But then come headed into sophomore spring, I sort of began obsessively thinking about, oh, I need to run every day. I
Mm.
need to control what I'm sort of eating. I need to have a sense of nobody else can sort of control anything that's happening, both in academics, personal life, family life. And what's weird is that it doesn't sort of happen overnight, but a lot of times you're sort of praised for taking care of yourself or being like, oh, I watch what I eat every day. I'm trying to eat, quote, clean, whatever that means. I'm exercising more on the side because, as you know, Erica, in spring season, it's more about like we're deloading. We're coming off the season, so we're not deloading anymore. We're actually trying to just build some of our strength, and we're not trying to go all hard or heavy or anything like that because that's what the summer is for. And we're just trying to stay in sort of engaged in our sport. And you and I would hit the gym. We were probably one of the few people that actually lifted on our team. And that's because we just came from strong lifting backgrounds. And again, injury prevention was something close to me. But this is where I started to increase my running like I had never done before. But it was purposeful. And when I think you were one of them and my roommate at the time caught on and were like, why are you running again?
Mhm.
Why are you doing this every day? And those are the moments where you don't realize that when you're just watching something versus when you're obsessing about something.
Mhm.
And there was no reason for me to be running more. I was very fit. I was
Was
able to run.
Let me
Hmm?
just interject here. So, have you had like a background of maybe like perfectionism or obsessive behavior that kind of like led into this?
Yes. So I will say that I have a very sort of perfectionist attitude
Mhm.
where my harshest critic is always myself and I'm not kind to myself. And I didn't recognize this voice until I was deep in the eating disorder and when I was institutionalized at Hopkins Myers program was that when I wouldn't do something well, it wasn't like, all right, where did I go wrong? What can I do next time? It was just kind of a bad day. There's usually tomorrow. Instead, my words were like, you fail. You're never going to be good. How dare you not do this well? Everybody's going to notice. This is why you didn't do X, Y, and Z. A lot of these like statements that had no factual basis, and they're actually quite cruel because I would never dare say these things to other people. Like if you were training, you and I, and say you missed a few shots, and I'm on defense and like say I got the ball from you or I blocked a shot or something between you and I, why would I ever turn around and tell you like, man, Erica, you're doing real bad. Why are you so bad at your sport? Those are words that we would never say to each other because we've actually never believed those words. But when it came to myself, I was having just continual negative talk. And I didn't use any outlet for this negative talk outside of controlling what I could do and satisfy this sort of fixation on not good enough, failing, you're not running enough, you're not fit enough. What if you did this? You could be better. You would block more, you would start more, all these
Mhm.
things. When my sophomore season, I did start the whole time. I like got defensive player. I was an ESPN co-SIDA player. I had a bunch of like these accolades, but I was still telling myself the worst things. Um, and so, and that is something where I think that I didn't know how to emotionally regulate when I think about back when, instead of sort of resorting to kindness to myself in sort of quote failed attempts or just attempts, not failures, just attempts at stuff. Um, I turn to, I get very upset at myself. I get almost angry at myself. And when you don't know how to handle those emotions, we turn to things like controlling and restricting how much we eat, what we're consuming, what we're exercising, who we're surrounding ourselves with. And so for me, I sort of had this kind of, I guess, foundation or groundwork where my perfectionism wasn't used to advantage. It was used to the worst possible way. It was the totally counterproductive to anything any athlete and female athlete would want to be. Um, so definitely, I know that I had that. But what's interesting is that when you're younger, you think you're invincible, so you never think it's going to happen to you. And so I never thought to myself like, oh, I never had these problems in high school. I never thought about my body. I never thought about controlling or anything like that. But here I was, sophomore year, after a crazy good season of ours, and I was doing everything the most counterproductive that any athlete would do in the off season.
Mhm.
And when I think about it, the only reason I can think of is that I thought of myself as not good enough. Whatever it wanted to be, I think that a lot of girls and women can resonate with just those words, like I'm not enough. And you could put whatever other thing below it. I'm not enough for this, for that, for this, for that. It doesn't really matter. The overarching thought in my mind was, I'm just
Mhm.
not good enough. So,
That's really interesting insight into the mind of someone who's going through an eating disorder because with people who are on the outside, like me and some of our teammates at the time, we were just like, "Why is she doing this?" And we just wanted to shake you and be like, "You're so much more than this. You can make healthier decisions for your body. Why would you throw up your food? Why would you run on the treadmill for 2 miles before a practice?" We
yes.
just we couldn't understand it But I'm so glad you touched on what happens in the brain, because if parents are listening and they know a girl who's struggling with this, or maybe a coach has a girl with an eating disorder, you have to just really understand what's going on at a mental level and not judge them, and instead be there, listen, support, and walk with them, and understand that this might be a very long road to recovery. This is serious, and eating disorders are just as severe as drug addiction, a lot of clinical psychologists say. So, anyone who knows someone suffering has to be there, provide the right resources. And I know you got to a point where it was very rock bottom, and do
Yeah.
you wanna just go into that, and was that also the turning point to getting help?
Yeah. So after my sophomore year and headed into the summer, sort of the red flags were all there. Everybody's well aware that what I was doing was not healthy. People were well aware that um, I had an eating disorder at this time. It wasn't disordered eating, it was full blown an eating disorder with anorexia and like purging and stuff. And over exercise and obsessive compulsion with exercise. And then I went into the summer and I saw an outpatient person stabilizing a little bit, but I came in junior year at a very diff I was fighting tooth and nail my junior year season. Was it successful? Yes. Like I was successful, but like was I happy? Absolutely not. Was the world looking at me? Absolutely. Was I in shame? Did I feel like I've let everybody down? I really didn't like myself during this time. So I feel like I played a season that was just sort of, and this is where the eating disorder is difficult, is that everybody around you is looking at you and you know it because you're looking at yourself and you're like, this is so wrong. I am really sick and I'm trying to do better. But with a disease, you can't really do better. And like what you're saying, like having somebody walk side by side and having actual intervention and having accountability. But like when we're in college, we're kind of on our own. And like my parents, though, were very proactive, but and I say this for other parents that there's a point where your parental side needs to step over the independence of your young adult child. And that's where like my parents came in. So after junior year season, oh gosh, I just remember like I was playing and it was just I was so much more fatigued in the game, so much more tired after them. I would get way more bruised up, all those kinds of things. But like, yes, on paper, again, it was successful. But from the outside, everybody was like, this is anything but what we knew Sarah as last year and the year before playing. And so I went away my junior year for like an abroad program to Haiti and between Tennessee. And it was during that time that my dad basically pushed an intervention. He flew out, he saw me, he brought me to the hospital there in Tennessee, and that's where they put a feeding tube in. And it was in that moment where I was like, this is it. But the thing that like I remember is that I think as athletes, we just have a lot of pride. We have pride in our sport, we have pride in our team, we have pride in ourselves. And I think that what's hard is that pride both drives us, but also pride can kill us. And if we don't know how to balance our pride, what I was doing is I was just killing myself slowly. I was doing everything that's against what a prideful and proud soccer player would want to be, but also just a young woman at that time in my life. And so I remember those words from my brother. He's a Navy SEAL. And he essentially was like, and we know Navy SEALs, we look at them as like the best of the best, train everything, no matter what, give their life up for their fellow frogmen, is what they call them on their teams, their country, everything and anything. But the one thing that SEALs will never do is they'll never let pride kill them. Because if it's a team and yourself, if you dig yourself into your own grave, you're going to dig everybody else along with you. And
Mhm.
I think that that's what I saw a lot of was like I lost friends, I lost extraneous family members. I lost my social life. I lost what it looked like to have somebody look at me and not see a sick person because what all I saw as well was a sick person, but I didn't know what to do about it. So everybody from the outside was like, this, and this, like, come on, you've got it, you've got it. And then there's me looking at myself as frail and thin as I was in that off season junior year and a feeding tube. And I was still like, how do I do this? And I can't believe this is happening. So my pride was still keeping me from, you know, those next steps because had I just gotten and admitted to stuff much earlier on and didn't let pride get in my way and shame and stuff and anger, I'm sure I wouldn't have gotten to the point that I got to. And I think that's what's so alarming about an eating disorder is it can go from teeter-tottering to where I was in less than 6 months time. We're
Yeah.
talking like 4 or 5 months for me and maybe about 8 months total of like just going downhill. And then spring came and I was done. And then that's when in May of my junior year, finishing my abroad stuff, I was admitted to Johns Hopkins Myers floor at their psych annex and stuff, and that's where I started intensive inpatient therapy. I got
And it
the
changed your life
out.
too.
Well, yeah, that's the, that's the thing is that like during this time, what's crazy is that I think we justify our behaviors because we're still high functioning. Like I was still enrolled in school. I was still doing stuff. But like here I was walking in to Myers and I was half the weight I ever used to be. You would look at me and think that I was some like sickly cancer patient. But here I was with a disease that sort of just cycled and was killing myself through actions because I was just refusing to nourish myself. I was refusing to stop exercising. I was refusing to do everything that your body fights to do, which is survive. And getting to Hopkins is what saved my life. Doing both the sort of they call it DBT. That's where like the directive behavioral therapy stuff, dialectic behavior, that's like you do the actions and then you handle what happens after. So that's like the whole refeeding process. And then later on, once you're coming out to a good weights and stuff, you move into cognitive. And in that cognitive therapy, that's when the perfectionism was pulling up. That's when these thoughts of like, why did I not like how I looked when before I did? And it became a pure fixation. Like anger. I was just angry about stuff because I think what's hard is that I remember I was remembering and living through what people saw when they looked at me, but I was also screaming deep down inside, like, this isn't me. I'm just so sick and I can't get out of it. And that's what's really hard is I think that what's so stigmatizing about a disease like an eating disorder is you all the tools are in front of this person to kind of get themselves well again. But our mind is one of the strongest things there is. And so this is where I'm saying like pride kills. And so my disease never let me actually get well without these medical interventions. And I've seen a lot of people succumb to the disease. A lot of people have terrible, long-lasting outcomes, and like their hearts were bad, their muscles, their stomach, all these kinds of things. And so I'm very lucky and humbled that my journey with it started pretty acutely and ended really acutely, but it was terrifying how quickly I went downhill. And it was honestly without sort of due cause outside of feeling like I was a failure when there was no reason for me actually to feel like that, and I think that that's what's difficult is dealing with these feelings. How can we healthily cope and turn to something else that's bigger than ourselves and relying on other things, to help us through? Because if I had just listened to myself, I probably would have been, like, worse off much more quickly, but with getting help and turning to those friends that never turned their backs on me, and knew that I was sick and it wasn't like, "Oh, this is just Sarah." Um, that is what gave me hope, because you feel pretty hopeless and alone when you're going through an eating disorder, but I also think that that stands to say that we have a responsibility as persons that are struggling to say something much earlier, to reach out much earlier, and to be honest much earlier. Because if there was something that I always was, it was really honest. But when you get diagnosed with an eating disorder, you're the most dishonest person.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that's also what made me angry was I was like, I'm not dishonest inherently, like I'm truly not. You know that about me. But my eating disorder made me so dishonest. It made me a person that I hated, but it also was a person that I couldn't get away from. You're like battling all the
Mhm.
time.
You
So
become very isolated and you get really good at hiding things, and not only is it bad for you and your integrity, but it just destroys everything in your life, your relationship with your friends and your family, your roommates at the time, and it is hard for people to understand, and it's just this destructive cycle that just continues to get worse, and like you said, it can happen so fast, and it can start as something so small as, like, skipping a few meals a week or not eating breakfast or running on the treadmill before practice, and then it gets to a point where you just get so ill, your body is shutting down, and I remember seeing you that season when you hit rock bottom, you became so frail, and I just you were unrecognizable, and that's when we all knew this is severe,
right.
and I think your some of your friends and community also played a big part at the time, but just your parents and them stepping in and being like, "Look, enough is enough. You need medical help." And, correct me if I'm wrong, but was this, monitored, like, 24/7
Yeah.
medical help? Okay.
Fully inpatient
And
for 3 months.
that's hard, and for someone who had a lot of pride during the time, I mean, you could have taken the easy way out. You could have been like, "You know what? I'm not gonna go into this hospital. I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing," but you decided to take the difficult path because you knew you needed it to live.
Mhm.
So, can you just explain, like, what the hospital recovery was like for you? Because a lot of these eating disorders, that's where you need to go. You need to be monitored so that you can get nourished again.
Yeah, so when you go into a place like that, I mean, you all your meals are made and prepped for you. You've got no say in anything. So unless you like, I have a really bad an anaphylaxis allergy to bananas and avocado. So clearly they're not going to serve me that. But like vegetarianism, out of the door. Low carb, no way. So essentially, what it's doing is it's desensitizing you to everything and anything when it comes to food because you're learning to let go
Mm,
of control. And that is because it honestly is not about food. It's not. And I think that that's where it is difficult to come to terms with that whole like it just starts with a little couple things where you're like, oh, I'm just going to do this or this. But then it turns into like these full blown, like, oh, I don't eat blah, 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 blah. And I only do fasting and all, all these things that we hear in sort of mainstream fitness culture because it's like a culture now. It's not really like a lifestyle. Um, and so when you get in, everything is done for you. You are allowed to like wear what you want to wear. You have limited access to your phone.
what
Your
about bathrooms? bathrooms in
No,
growing up, and that's
you were
monitored.
monitored. So, like, after you eat, you're not allowed to go to the restroom for,
Oh,
like, 90
wow.
minutes. You are monitored whenever you go to the restroom. You're woken
Wow.
up many times throughout the night for all your vital signs. In the morning, you're weighed. You have a weekly meeting with your therapist. You have a family meeting as well.
Mm,
Then you have at the end of the week with your providers. So, and like tons of group stuff. I mean, if
that's
there is a
humbling. That's
time,
really humbling.
you have no control of anything. And I think that that is where people recognize that, as you said, you could take the easy way out and never do something like that. Even like outpatient, intensive outpatient, which is what I moved to after 3 months. So after that, when I hit weight, then I got to go to intensive outpatient, which means like I get to live at this house with other people and it's less monitored and it's kind of them testing how do you do without 24/7 observation. We give you a bit of freedom to decide and choose on your own. So like, I started to be able to exercise just a little bit, but it was like, what is she going to do? Is she going to go overboard and start, abusing this? Or is she going to maintain that integrity and humility and recognize that no, it's better if I make the right decision and only exercise the amount that I'm supposed to do and allotted times and days and everything and eat when I'm supposed to and log it and be truthful. Um, and that's what's so interesting is that you go, like I was saying, you go from this super deceptive person because you're so fearful about both what your behaviors have done to you and the stigma that comes with being judged by said behaviors. So it's just like this cycle, really negative, horrible cycle. But here you are in this outpatient setting where you now have accountability. You have accountability to honor like what you know works and to that of your treatment teams, or don't lie to them. But also at the end of the day, like you don't want to really lie to yourself because that's the thing that kept making you feel even worse. And so I really tried to take that as most seriously as I could because I really wanted to play my senior year. And when you get into that outpatient setting, you got to prove it. And then you go to like from the intensive outpatient to like you have to go to the hospital a few days a week. You have to get weighed. You got to go to a weekly appointment with both your therapist and your psychiatrist. And you do a family thing every few weeks. So they just take it kind of like they scale it back. And I was able to have like a great senior season. And I think that that's where it's interesting. I came from a feeding tube in May, walking in and having my life saved, to playing in August, September without that crazy regimen that I self perpetuated back when I was a sophomore in the spring, thinking like I had to do just always extra, always this, always that, restrict that, pull back this, pull back that, all this control when like actually all I had to do was, yeah, was I winded and it sucked more? Sure. But after about 4 weeks of that conditioning, your body has been well conditioned as an athlete that it really does come back. But it also came back because I wasn't chronically dealing with this. And I think that that's what's scary is that I had girls in there that had been chronically dealing with these eating disorders since they were like 12, 14, 15, 16, 7, like year after decades. And I just was sitting there as like a, this bright eyed 21-year-old that was going through it in this acute sort of atypical like onset and thought to myself, I am grateful I never had to do with that. But also, my heart breaks for girls that have these struggles that start early because the damage that you can do to your body and your heart, your joints, like the osteoporosis, penia stuff in young women with these eating disorders is terrible. And your heart, like, we know what happens when we deprive our heart of nutrition, and you can have all these cardiomyopathy stuff, and I think that that's where I was like, "Wow, I I had it so good, then so bad, and now I'm sort of at this, like, sort of this, hindsight, and just being humbled that I know I never want this to be a lifetime problem,
Mhm.
and I don't wanna be chronically ill." And I think that that's where the sort of earlier the onset and consistency of it staying in your life doesn't help with sort of your good outcomes in general. And that's where I would just like, man, these young girls, I felt really just heartbroken because I I don't know what I would have done if I was in high school and had these types of problems occurring and then getting well for like a year or so and then having it again in college and then cycling back and cycling forward. Your mind and your body can only take so much. And that's why I think like when you go all in and you want to get better and you're doing what you can and you're using these medical resources and so forth, you go all in because you don't have a lot of room to just not. It's not something that I think you're not gonna beat it on your own, and I think that that's where I think the big take home message was, "You can't do this on your own," and so the earlier you start telling yourself that, the better off it is, and that's where I'm like, a message to young girls is the second you really start feeling yourself in this sort of like fixation, whatever the fixation is, if you just say, "Hey, mom or dad or sibling or cousin or grandma or whomever is your confidant, say, I think I'm having these sort of obsessive thoughts, and it's hard for me not to do these same things every day because I worry about X, Y, and Z." Earlier you can say it, the better it's going to be because right then and there, you've sort of taken away that deceptive, dishonest hiding of behavior and you've put it out there. And that's where you can be like, now I'm being kinder to myself. I'm being open to other people. And that allows every others around me to start kind of recognizing and sounding the alarm. I know it sucks. And I think this is where I'm like, I know how annoying it is for to be sort of this like everybody's like hawkeyeing you and watching you and patrolling in a sense, but you need to sort of change that narrative in your mind and realize it's like, no, these people care about me. These people want me to be better. These people are only helping me. It's not this like Hawkeye, I don't trust you. What they don't trust is the eating disorder. They want to trust you, but they know that you are griping with something that has complete control over your like thoughts and actions. And so I tried to remind myself that when I would get snippy or irritated by later on, like after college and graduating, and like still doing once a month appointments and moving them out. And then when I moved to Phoenix, I kept my accountability to keep with a therapist every couple of months and one that mine at Hopkins had picked. It was like really irritating because I was like, I am good now. Like, why am I doing this? But like, I tried to remind myself everybody remembers how bad it was, and that's what they are afraid of. And so it's just better to me to be humble and grateful than it is to be like angry and defensive. Because angry and defensive was all the eating disorder. But now it's time for like kindness and being more gentle to yourself and more sort of thankful instead, um, with your support group. So
I think that's really great advice, and sometimes it does take putting yourself in a strict recovery program in order to get better. And it breaks my heart seeing this happen with girls younger and younger. And I think a lot of them feel invincible and like they can heal themselves or get over it themselves. But at that point, you're so broken on the inside, or maybe you're so insecure and you're the one who is part of the problem. So you're not going to be the solution because you're ill. And when a parent or adult steps in, like you said, Sarah, that's them wanting to save your life. And we have friends. I used to live with a girl who was a bulimic for over 10 years, and she developed osteoporosis and heart issues, digestive issues. Her esophagus was messed up from throwing up all the time. I mean, there's so many negative effects that eventually your body is not going to be able to handle, and you're going to break down and you can't sustain that. And I also don't think there's enough education on the repercussions, like, it's just not no one discusses it enough, and I also think that's part of girls not thinking about their future and who they wanna be and their family and being able to be alive for the rest of their lives, and it's hard, especially now. I mean, when you went through yours, Instagram didn't really exist when you and I were in college. TikTok definitely wasn't out. I think it was
Oh,
just Facebook, but now everywhere a young girl looks, she sees all these images on social media, Instagram models, bikini pictures, and just all these things about what a body, quote unquote, should look like. And that can definitely cause some insecurity. And like you said, I can't even imagine growing up in that time, I don't know how I would have handled things. And I mean, even us adults who are on social media, we can succumb to comparison at times. We're human, we're not perfect, but thankfully for adults, our brains are fully developed.
mhm,
Whereas a teenage girl who's on TikTok looking around at these models and these other bodies and celebrities, and her brain's not fully developed to discern what's good and bad and what's healthy and what's not, man, that's dangerous. It's
mhm.
like the phone is now being the parent. Like, how much are parents really raising their kids now? And I'm very against social media for youth. I think there should be limits to what apps they can be on. Um, so it's hard. I mean, I know it's a part of life, and sometimes it can be used for good things, for networking, your career, or whatever. But for a teenage girl, it can be really destructive. And I mean, I think adults know what goes on these platforms, but there's some really terrible trends that perpetuate this restrictive skinny culture. And I'm not on TikTok, but I hear about them and I get really upset when I hear about them.
Oh, yeah. I'm not on TikTok, not on
Mm-mm.
Facebook. I do have Instagram, and that's where I'm like, yeah, if you we both said it, like, we think we're invincible when we're younger, um, but it's both, like, it has the bad side and the good side. Like, an invincible thing on the good side, like, when I tore my ACL for the 3rd time when I was in high school, everybody was like, "Oh, you're totally done." But I was like, "No, I'm not. I believe in myself and I can do this and I'm gonna do it right. I'm, et cetera, et cetera." I just had really bad luck with a failed graft and like hypermobility, all these stuff that were kind of like out of my control. And this is where I'm like, yes, I want to be invincible and I want to do it. And what? I made it 4 years of college soccer, 2 years of playing on like a rec and then the semi-pro stuff. And like I'm glad that I used that sort of like being invincible to my advantage. But that's because I followed all professionals' advice, surgeons, PTs, soccer coaches, did all the personal training, took it slow, never did something outside of myself. All I did was I had to just believe in myself that I can do it. I can work on it. I will be back to where Sarah, the soccer player, needs to be. It was never like I need to be the best, I need to be this. It was just like I'm going to get back to playing the soccer that Sarah loves. But now when it comes to this sort of invincible on the bad side, now we have this sort of like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I'm going to listen to whomever I want to listen to. And it's a lot of like I. And I think
I call it the god of self.
yeah, and that's what's
Yeah.
so that's what like that's where I think like as athletes we train our mind as we like train our body, but it's because we're training for these goals and to be what we can to sustain in games, in competitions, and learn new skills and just be confident and comfortable to whatever adverse condition gets thrown to us on the field. There are only so many things you can prepare for. So what you're doing is you're training both your mind and your body to handle all these changes in the game. You're going to go against a player who's 6'3". Well, I'm 5'10". How am I going to jump to the ball? Well, these are things that we adjust to and we overcome. Or how am I going to play against somebody who's faster? Or like all these sort of things. But if I ever tried to do that on my own and like only listen to myself, I would have never been successful as a player. There's just no way that the self, the me, the I, the ego could ever win. I would
Right.
not be a comfortable and confident player if I ever took that approach. And so when it comes to this, like, I'm going to rely on myself when it comes to these random strangers or images that we're seeing online, or people talking about this, like these bad cultures and diets, or I mean, because I'm on clinical rotations right now, and I had a 19-year-old girl talk about how she drinks like she saw on TikTok drinking certain energy drinks at different times of the day for people who work night shifts. And like then she talked about how her stomach was feeling, she has a bit of depression, all these kinds of things. And I just was like, how many good caffeine drinks and what caffeine and what are you at? And I asked her to show it to me. And I was just flabbergasted. This girl was drinking 4 Red Bulls between the hours of 4 p.m. and like 2 a.m. And her
Because of
shift,
a TikTok celebrity?
yeah, and because her
Yeah.
shift was only from 3 to 11, and I just was like, what is this? And like,
Yeah.
and I then she was telling me that she like wasn't eating a lot, and I like,
Well,
and I was
there's trends. There's trends on TikTok. There was one I heard about because an account I follow on Instagram, they do a lot about exposing this stuff and why it's so bad. And they said that there was a trend how all these girls were posting on TikTok, college girls, that they didn't eat the whole day so that they can get drunk faster.
yes,
And guys, like your 12-year-old girl who has access to TikTok could be exposed to something as ridiculous as that. Like, keep that in mind. And I still don't know if like parents know what goes on TikTok. Like, it's insane. And it's so flabbergasting. Like, you're just like, wait, what? That trend is insane.
mm-hmm. And I think that this because again, like I said, coming into college, we didn't have anything. We had like old school like magazine and Facebook and stuff. So there wasn't like this the culture that we knew were professional female and male athletes.
Mhm.
Um or like our own trainers that we trained with and our club teams and stuff. And so now when I think about it, we are succumbing to some comparison. Um I think that what's difficult is now, like, for me to stay in shape, I do like CrossFit and yoga. And with my CrossFit and stuff, it's just to like stay in shape and like if there's things that don't feel good, we always scale it. And you know, it's the sport is not for everybody, but like it's now a sport. And so I see these female athletes that are in it. And what's pretty incredible is that they're all very like they're just very strong looking and whatnot. But like if I were to ever tell myself that that's what I want to be and do, it's immediately I have to remind myself this is their job.
Mhm.
They are paid. They have all of these resources, all of these things. And so I think that reality is distorted because if I ever think that I'm going to be like her name is Tia. If I ever think I'm going to be like her or Kara Saunders or just these female athletes that are like, they're so good, but it's because they're professionals. It's kind of like
Mhm.
us, where like as kids, we could dream about being like a Mia Hamm, you know?
Mhm.
But like we never saw these images of Mia Hamm other than playing her sport. But now we have basically anybody and everybody online talking about and showing themselves doing these things where you're like, what? Like, just how? But like, people will follow it and listen to it. And the thing is that it's not targeted to a certain demographic. It's just accessible to anybody and everybody. And I
That's
think that
terrifying.
if I had been seeing the kind of like, imagine if we saw our soccer team on TikTok or whatnot, like showing all these videos of like just our bodies or something like
Mhm.
that in regards to our sport. I can't even make that make sense in my brain right now. If I was like 16, 17, and that's what I was seeing for like women's college soccer. And the thing is because we don't see it because it's literally impossible to have that kind of stuff make sense for when it comes to playing a competitive sport. But on the flip side, all those other images and women and these like influencers and accounts and college girls or whatever, all of that is now flooded in the same space that we would otherwise see like Armia Hams or like these great like Sydney LaRue, all these other people that are like Julie Ertz. These are girls that played with in my soccer club and on my team. Like they're not the ones that we're seeing constantly that would shape young minds
Mhm.
about what healthy body image is. And that's what's so like frightening to me is that our exposure, we just didn't have it. But now everybody has can see anything and everything. There's no real like filter or target or sort of messaging. Like I'm like, man, like having a daughter in my future with my husband, like he would love to have a daughter. He says this a lot, but I'm also like, I can't even what would be out like what would my daughter see versus like what I ever really had some like exposure to. And you're right, like how do
Mhm.
you even you can't even I don't know how you even make it be a different message. I'm baffled by what is out there and I cannot imagine the barrage of imaging and images I would see that were of girls that had no relation to me, were not of ones that were influenced to what I want, but I was still being shown them constantly.
Mhm.
Like we all used to be like, oh, Cosmopolitan, like, ooh, that magazine, because it had like the girl on the front or whatnot. But then when you would flip through it, it just had like the words about
Mhm.
diets or like blah, 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 blah. But now long gone are Cosmo magazines. It's all on social media, but it's like it's images. It's like this is what you do, this is what you do. And then you see the same reel and
Mhm.
same themes of the reels constantly. I don't know. This is what
And
I'm
it's
like,
images that are just giving this illusion of this, like, quote unquote perfect life and perfect body or whatever, and it's all fake.
yeah.
And actually one example of this was that I was following this one fitness influencer over 10 years ago when I was just getting started in the fitness industry. I was also doing bikini fitness shows at the time and just trying to see like what was out there, which is really scary because it's just like so unregulated, like who's selling like diet and like workout plans. But that's another podcast. But I remember following this influencer. Her name is Brittany Dawn, and I'll include her Instagram now in the caption below because she's now a great follow. But over 10 years ago, her page was all her half naked, looking super toned and fit and like really thin and just very like done up. And I remember thinking, wow, she's like a very beautiful girl. Like it looks like she has her life together. And I don't know how I went back to her account, but I went back to her account last year. For some reason it popped up in my feed and it was the same Brittany Dawn. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I remember this chick." Her page is completely different. She's fully clothed, she looks healthier, she gained weight, and I clicked on a photo of her. It was a transformation picture, her from
Yeah.
10 years ago when she was super thin and she like looked like she was like living this great life, and then a photo of her now when she's healthier. And she gave her testimony and she said, in the picture on the left 10 years ago, I had an eating disorder. I was depressed. I was drinking alcohol, and it looked like I was living the perfect life on Instagram, but I was dying on the inside. And now I finally found that I'm not going to seek approval from the world anymore, and I'm going to have a more modest approach to my account. I'm going to have a different purpose in my account, and it's more about like faith-based stuff and like her spirituality, and it's like not even about fitness anymore and like getting half naked. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." Like if she can transform like that and go from this broken state to just this healthy, vibrant woman who came out of that. And if you can come out of your eating disorder and be where you are at now and happy, man, so many girls can come out of that darkness into light. And I just wanted to share that as encouragement for anyone who's struggling with whatever body image, eating disorder, depression, anything mental health related. You can come out of it. But like we were saying earlier, you can't rely on yourself because you're broken on the inside, you're hurt, you're not well, you're ill, and you need that community, and you need that professional help as well. And Sarah, I know in earlier in the episode you kind of mentioned having purpose and
Mhm.
not finding your purpose in this like disease and just like controlling things, but finding purpose in something else. And I just want to ask, like, now that you're healthy, like what are you finding more purpose in your life, and how are you able to stay on track?
Yeah, it's so weird. I thought about it when I was driving back from the clinic. So now I'm a third year med student, and I've always wanted to go to medical school. It was like always a goal since I was a kid. But I was thinking of when I was driving from the clinic, and I was like, how long has it been since I went into the hospital? And I was like trying to do the math. I'm 33 now, and I went into the hospital when I was 21. And it's basically like I'm in another lifetime.
Mhm.
And I think that when it comes to my eating disorder, it's something that if I'm asked, like if a patient brought up something or somebody was saying something in passing or in a group, like I will openly talk about it because there wasn't there wasn't people that were talking about it. So I think a thing that I've done now is the narrative. I really want to have it be about sort of resilience, to be about, I guess, like understanding and empathy. Um, and so that's one thing where, and I also feel like that if people are having a lot of talk about diet or fastings or all these kinds of things, it's something that I'm not going to. be defensive to them about. But I will say that I will be like, I caution you against taking things that are very restrictive. And I want you to consult a physician about this. Start with the information, start with your baseline blood work, talk about like how you're feeling and stuff like that, because you kind of need to know where you're at. And if there's other things that are going on, like in your mind versus that of in your physically in your body, and you're trying to do stuff otherwise and actually work on something else. I think that's why sort of our quick fix jumping to certain things isn't the right way. And that's why I think when it comes to this sort of other side to it is that I really want people to sort of use the experts around them to sort of approach that this isn't like, oh, I just need to feel well again, blah, blah, blah. It's like a lifestyle and an actual life-changing thing you want to do, because you don't want to do something for the interim. You want to do something for the long term. And so I think that that comes to like with my purpose. Being in medical school and sort of being 12 years out. Yeah, 11, 12 years out. Yeah, 12 years out from when I was so sick. I am now sort of powered by humility and by experience. And so for me, all I want to do is I really want to be a kind physician that listens to my patients. I want to be the patient's advocate. I want to be somebody that will help them better or overcome something that seems insurmountable. And on that, I also think that had younger me back when I was 21 to now, I think also a part of it is that um, you can't ever make up for time lost. And so part of my purpose now is that I lost a lot when I was really sick. And so I make sure that in present day, I I have a purpose of living to be joyful and loving and building a life with my husband and in our future children and with my parents and giving back the sort of gratitude and also just kindness that I know is inherent to myself and always honoring that because I younger Sarah didn't do that, and I don't ever want to take any step back where I start to lose that about myself. And so my purpose changes to be much more giving and much more purposeful in what I'm doing rather than anything that's objective and also like subjective to like things that I see on the outside no longer influence how I feel about myself, how I feel about where I am in like my medical career, how I feel about my relationship with my husband, how I feel about my future. I'm not letting those things have any more sort of control or say. And so I think that those are my three big things is that I I talk about it openly and with kindness. And then with my patients, I have a purpose to ensure that I can give them the best care and be heard. And then for myself, I live for my husband and my family and ensuring that I give what I think is some of my better qualities, and that is just my kindness and sort of supportive, loving nature. Um, those are the things that drive me, and those are things that I never really knew about back when I was young. But I think that if you listen to yourself a little bit more and you realize that these good things about you by being kind and listening and just helpful because I think my husband says, like, he tells me, but every husband or partner or whatnot tells you you're the best or like you're the most or whatnot. But my husband was like, one of the reasons why I loved you so much is because you're so kind. You're kind to anybody and everybody. And what and that's where I just remind myself I always have to be kind first because kindness is a gift that I think that I love about myself and I love to give others. And if I lose that purpose in my life, then oh, that's where you think back on your darkest of times and you remember that you have to listen to what your purpose is. And when we're young, there's a lot of noise, but I promise that it gets a lot clearer. And the earlier you start to listen and believe in yourself, the better you're off and the happier and the more fulfilled that you will be, truly fulfilled. I think that that's where we're trying to grab for things that fulfill us when there's actually you yourself can be fulfilling and help fulfill others. And I think that that's where we never need to doubt ourselves. So,
I love that, and I almost was, like, tearing up, and my heart was just so full listening to you explain that, and just looking at some of the things you just listed off about your purpose. One thing I noticed that they all have in common is they're about service to
mhm,
others and filling everyone else's lives with kindness and joy, and I look back to, like, your eating disorder time, and that was a very selfish time, and
mhm,
you hurt others by doing that, and now just to see that change in heart inside of you and just coming outside and just pouring onto others is so amazing, and, like, that alone as a purpose is just so fulfilling, so sustainable, and I urge you guys to really think about what your purpose is. And maybe you haven't thought about it yet, but think about what are some of your strengths where you can be of service to other people. Because in reality, we're not here alone, we're not doing life alone. Humans get fulfillment from being in community and
mhm,
helping others. And it's the same with playing soccer and sports. It's all about the team and how you make your teammates better, you make them more motivated, and really think about this take home lesson from this discussion. I'm going to include Sarah's Instagram in the caption below. And I'm also going to include a blog that I wrote on the female athlete triad and eating disorders, because that blog has some resources and links in there that I also want you to check out. So be sure to read through that blog and just look at the resources available out there for eating disorders and seeking professional help. But Sarah, thank you again for coming on, and it was just so amazing to have you share your story.
thank you, Erica, and truly it's an honor to be here, and again, I thank you for always being my friend and a best friend, and truly, you had always met me where I was, and so to think back when we met when I was, like, what, 18, 19, and you were just a senior in college to now, I couldn't have more joy and thankfulness and gratitude for our friendship.
Likewise, and I'm glad that we're still in touch, and I will definitely be seeing you soon for celebrations. But thank you again, Sarah, and see you guys next week.